Kim Knight here from Kim Knight Health, and today in our webinar we're going to look at why symptoms are often a sign of healing. And I've talked about this before, but it is so important. It is a major missing part of our current medical system, and there are only really, relatively speaking, very few people who are talking about this in the world. But this is in the process of changing, and it is about to change big time with an event that I'm going to share at the end of this webinar. But this information that when we have symptoms, it is often a sign our body is actually healing itself, is one of the most, not even just misunderstood, but unknown pieces of information in healthcare. And once we understand this, and we understand the different cycles of healing that our body goes through to heal an illness, and also the fact that when we have physical symptoms, it's very often nothing or very little to do with anything physical fundamentally. There's much more going on underneath, which I'm also going to talk about today. Once we understand this, then our whole paradigm, our whole worldview about healing changes, and we feel much more empowered. We feel much less afraid, because let's face it, there can be a huge amount of fear around illness. So let's look at some examples and some theory around why symptoms are often a sign that we're healing. Now, I love this quote: "Your body's ability to heal is far greater than anyone has ever permitted you to believe." And this is such a beautiful, true saying. It really is. There's so much truth in this. In my experience, our body is the ultimate self-healing machine. It is designed to heal itself, but we have not been taught this. Much healing it does automatically without us even having to think about it. It's healing things all the time and we don't even know. The processes and the chemical functions that are going on inside your body right now, millions of processes, are beyond our ability to even, comprehend the complexity of what is going on inside our body at any given moment. But in one way, we do know that our body self-heals, because most people, for example, when they cut themselves, they expect the body to heal, right? We don't think, oh my goodness, I've cut myself and that cut is never going to heal. We might put a plaster on it, we may, wash it, whatever, but we know intuitively that it's going to heal. Now, the same if you break a leg or an arm and you get your arm put in plaster, and we know that the body's going to heal, or we at least hope the body is going to heal, and we mostly expect that it's going to heal. And the plaster is just holding the bones in place. It's a physical support, but the actual healing is done by the body. But when it comes to chronic illnesses, things like cancer and other illnesses, often we don't tend to think like that. We tend to go into fear and think that something is wrong, think that the body has made a mistake. And as far as I understand, the body never makes mistakes. Never, 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 never makes mistakes. There's always a reason. So we have to find out, what is the reason? Why is my body presenting these symptoms? So personally, over the last 25 plus years, I've healed myself without medication or supplements from asthma, from allergies, from chronic fatigue syndrome, from clinical depression, chronic back pain, chronic UTIs, urinary tract infections, chronic anxiety, stress, and a few other things. So I do know from personal experience what is possible. And so what I'm sharing today is really coming from my personal experience of everything that I've gone through, plus all the learning that I had to go through to do that, and all the change that I had to go through to do that, plus 20 years of professional training, probably about 20,000 hours of professional training, and then 12 years of working with clients so far. and seeing the same thing again and again and again, our body has an incredible ability to heal, and symptoms are not a mistake. Now, however, before I go on, I do think it's really important that I share that I do not diagnose, heal, treat, cure any person or medical condition. Please, if you need medical help, please seek it. It is really important that you seek the right help for you. You know what's right for you. Only you know what's right for you. I am just sharing my experience here, my personal experience, and what I've observed working with many different clients. But this is my personal experience, and you need to do always what is right for you. So our agenda today is a brief theory of what we call the stress regeneration cycle in the body, which is the natural healing cycle of the body, which most people have never heard of. And then some examples of when the body is going through this natural healing cycle. So I'll start off with this picture and ask, what would you do if you looked in the mirror and you saw your eye looking like this? I know it's a bit of a fuzzy picture, but it's blown up and it's a little fuzzy. But as you can see, there was a huge swelling in the right eye there, and actually this was my eye, and this was this week, which is why I decided to do a webinar on this. So this was my eye, and my question to you is, would this automatically have you thinking I've got to go to a special eye clinic or the emergency department or my doctor? Or would you have a different perspective? And what I hope to show you today is a wider perspective. I'm not saying not to include the perspective of going to a doctor or a medical clinic, because sometimes we need to do that. I just want to show you a wider perspective and understanding of what was actually going on here and why I didn't actually need to go to a clinic. So as I said, why I didn't go straight to the doctor, why I understood this may actually have been a natural healing response, and what I did to help my body heal. That's what I'm going to be sharing in this webinar. So let's do a little bit of theory. It's very important to understand the theory first of all. And we have in our body what we call a natural healing cycle, and you've probably seen this image, this yin-yang image. It's quite common nowadays. It comes from China, and it shows the nature of the universe, that we have yin and yang. It's polarity. So we have up, down, dark, light, hot, cold, and these are the two extremes, if you like, and the polarities of everything that is in manifestation in physical matter in the universe. And the fact that there's a black dot in the white and a white dot in the black means that whenever we get to an extreme of one, it turns into the other. But it's really important to understand that we live in a universe of polarity. And in the body, when it comes to health and healing, we have the same dynamic, because this yin and yang is a law. It's a physical law, or we could say a law of the universe. And human beings come under this law. We are part of nature, and we come under what are called the laws of nature and the laws of the universe. So we tend to forget and tend to think sometimes that we're separate from nature, but we're not. We're part of nature, part of, the macrocosm and the microcosm, and so we're just like a little macro part of or a micro part of the macro. So we have this within us too, this yin-yang. And this is how it looks in terms of the natural healing cycle. And we have what we call the 5 major points and phases of healing that we must go through to completely, fully heal if we have a health issue. And I'm going to go into this in depth over several slides. But we have what is called a stress trigger, where something stressful happens. And that puts us in a stress phase. It puts our body into the stress response, which medically is called the sympathetic nervous system response. And when our body is in that stress response, at a fundamental level, physiologically, there is some part of our body that feels it's in danger. Either it feels it's in physical danger or emotional danger. But if it's feeling it's in emotional danger, it still puts it into the physical danger response, this sympathetic nervous system response. And that changes every function of every system in our body. So for example, our digestive system, when it thinks it's in danger, it starts to shut down. Blood gets redirected to the external limbs so that we can run, because it thinks, well, I don't need to eat and I don't need to digest because I'm being chased by a tiger, but I do need to be able to run away from the tiger. So the digestive system doesn't operate as well as it should normally when we're in a stress response. Our nervous system ramps up, our breathing changes, our heart rate changes to pump that blood to the limbs. Everything changes in our body when we're in the stress response. Now, according to Harvard University, at least 80% of all illness is caused at a fundamental level by stress. In my experience, I'd probably put it closer to 95%. Because what is happening in our society is most people are staying stuck in the stress response all the time. They are busy, 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 doing, million things on their to-do list. They have family, they have work, they're navigating traffic. You know, we live in a stressful world. So our body is in this stress response, but that is very, very stressful and trying for the body. It's incredibly resilient, but it is having an effect. And one of the ways we describe this is we say it's doing damage to the body. But in this stress phase, we don't actually notice any symptoms often, and we don't feel any symptoms often. There are no exhibiting symptoms, but the stress is going on an unseen level nonetheless. Now then what happens is we go through this stress phase, and I'm going to give some examples in a minute. I'm just going through the theory right now. We then have what we call a regeneration trigger, where something triggers our body physiologically into the regeneration healing response. And we flip into what is more commonly known as the parasympathetic nervous system response, which means our body goes into the relaxation response. It starts to regenerate. So lots of R words there, whereas the other side all starts with S. I tend to also refer to the stress response as the SOS response, because actually our body is sending out an SOS, but mainly we're not hearing it. So our body flips into the regeneration phase, and that is when our body can heal itself. That is when our body actually goes into self-healing mode. And then once we come through that phase, we come out the other side and we're back into health. So the yin and yang have rebalanced themselves. But what is really interesting about this regeneration phase is that even though the body is self-healing, that is often when we have symptoms. Right now, it's not always like this, because this is very simple. It becomes much more complex than what I'm sharing here. I'm just sort of sharing level 1 understanding, if you like. But most people do not realize that when they are experiencing symptoms, often they are in this regeneration phase. And often this is the time when people feel worse. For example, in this next diagram, which makes it a little bit more complex, we have what is called a healing peak here. It's within the regeneration phase, but it's a healing peak where temporarily we actually go back into the stress phase. And for example, this will be the time where you're lying in bed with flu and your temperature is maximum. You just feel the worst ever. You just feel like you're going to die. You just feel so bad, and you just think, oh my God, I'm not going to make this through, or make it through this. And this is often when we reach for more medication, or we go to the doctor and we have injections and antibiotics and all this stuff. But actually, it's a part of the natural healing cycle. Now, I need to be very careful here, as I said before, is that if you need medical attention, please go and get it. This is just what I've learned through theory and practice for myself, but you must do what is safe for you. Safety is absolutely paramount. So I am not giving advice here. I am sharing my own personal experience and my personal training. So when we go into this healing peak, that can be when things get really dodgy, really scary, really extreme from a symptom perspective. For example, also here, this is when heart attacks often happen in this healing phase. And some people get through it and some people don't. But nevertheless, the body is in a self-healing phase at this point. Now, this is the same thing sort of demonstrated or diagrammed in a different way, where we have our health, everything is normal, then we have a traumatic life event. And that puts us into a stress phase. And that stress phase could last 5 minutes, a day, a week, a month, a year, 10 years, 20 years, right? And also bear in mind that we're not just going through one phase at any one point in time. Often we can be having multiple of these going on at any one time. And we can also have multiple events going on where part of us is in the stress phase and part of us is in the regeneration phase, but then that's flipped over as well. So we've got like these multiple stress regeneration phases going on. And well, the way we describe that is we call it a constellation. It's a constellation of stress regeneration events going on simultaneously. And normally, if people have a chronic illness, such as chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, which are the illnesses that I tend to help people with, or really complex long-term conditions that they just don't seem to be able to get rid of, it's probably because there are multiple stress regeneration events going on at the same time. So this is just a diagram of the same thing, just put it in a different way. And one important point to point out here is what we call the freeze event, which we also call a Udin. And this can occur at the start of the stress phase, and it's what puts us into the stress phase, where we have a significant emotional event which creates a shock in the body. It could be a physical shock, but often it's an emotional shock, and the two often go hand in hand. So let me explain a little bit more about a Udin, what a Udin is. A Udin is an unexpected, dramatic, isolating, no strategy event. It's unexpected because it comes out of the blue. It's dramatic because it feels dramatic to us, you know, and this is all personal. What is dramatic for one person may not be dramatic for another person, right? This is all subjective. It's isolating because often we feel like we are alone and there is nobody to help us. And there is no strategy in the moment of having that experience. There's no strategy to get out of it. So for example, a car accident, that is a Udin moment. It's unexpected, often that, you know, just bam, it just happens. It is dramatic. It is isolating for the body. It feels like it may not have, you know, the right support in that second, in that moment, and there's no strategy in that moment to deal with it. So the trauma and the fear literally get frozen into the body in that moment. The same thing can happen with an emotional Udin event. So I'll give you an example. A year and a half ago, I was feeling very comfortable in my cozy home. I'd always been told by my landlords that I could live there for as long as I wanted. They were never going to want to move back in. So I felt very secure, which is very important to me, to feel that I feel secure in my home. And then one day, just out of the blue, they just said to me, oh, you have to move out of your house. It's not a big deal, but you have to move out. And I'm like, whoa. To me, that was just huge. It was totally unexpected. For me, it was dramatic. It felt very isolating because I just didn't know who to go to ask for help, who could I, you know, live with, and if I didn't find somewhere to live. I had no strategy in that moment, and my body took that shock on. The good thing is, because I know this, it was happening, but at the same time as it was happening, I was observing it happening and knowing it was happening. So I knew what was happening. A lot of the time, people don't know when these things that, well, they know when it's happening, but they don't understand this effect of what is happening. And whatever emotions are triggered in that moment, and usually one of the biggest ones is fear. It could also be, for example, if you just hear somebody's died, it will be grief and sadness. But usually there's a level of fear. And that fear literally gets frozen into the cells. And energetically, it's interesting, freeze is cold, and fear is energetically, vibrationally a cold energy. And that energy gets locked into the cells. And because through the laws of quantum physics, we know that energy cannot be destroyed, but it can be transformed. But if that energy, once it's generated, it's locked into the body and it just stays there. And if it stays in the body, in the cells, it will start to alter the functioning of the cells. And over a long period of time, it will eventually build up to disease, because disease is dis-ease. So anyway, that's a Udin event. So here are some examples of this healing cycle. So for example, say here, everything is hunky-dory, you're at work, and then your boss comes in and says, hey, this project that we thought we had 2 months to finish, you've actually only got 2 weeks. And that puts the body into the stress response, a little bit of a Udin, not a major Udin maybe, but certainly puts the body into the stress response, because the body in its infinite intelligence knows that is too much work to manage in 2 weeks. But, you know, it's just how things happen, isn't it, at work? And we just have to put up with it. We have to suck it up, or whatever it was that you were taught. And maybe we hold all that, those feelings inside. We don't feel courageous enough to speak our truth and say, well, actually, no, I can't do that job, or I need more help, you know, I need somebody to help me, or whatever it is. So we hold all that emotion inside and we carry on with the job. And for the next 2 weeks, we're just like incredibly stressed. We're also incredibly stressed because we're working maybe 18 hours a day, which is far more than the body is designed to work for. And so the body is constantly in this stress response, which, as I said earlier, is really, really unhealthy. It's putting the body under far too much strain, and it is not natural. And we have to keep reminding ourselves and remembering that we are part of nature, and if we want to stay healthy, we have to live within the laws of nature. Now, if we are working 18 hours a day, consistently staying in the stress response, that is what we call breaking the laws of nature. It is breaking the laws of health. And if we break the laws of health, there will be consequences. So this person goes on for 2 weeks working really, really hard, and yes, they do a great job of the project, but in the meantime, they're not actually doing themselves a favor or doing their body a favor. And they're generating a lot of stress hormones, a lot of adrenaline, a lot of cortisol, overstraining every system and organ in the body. And then the job finishes. And that is the conflict resolution or the regeneration trigger. The job finishes. So they finish the job, and then they go home and they go, oh God, and then they feel exhausted, feel absolutely exhausted. Now that is the body flipping into the regeneration response or the regeneration phase, because we must complete this yin-yang cycle. Otherwise we die. We must complete this yin-yang cycle. So then they wake up the next day and they can't get out of bed, and they're as sick as a dog. And they go through a healing cycle, and that is the body taking them out very intelligently, saying, you just overworked me for 2 weeks. Now I need to repair, right? So what do most people do though? They force themselves out of bed, they take some medication, they mask the symptoms, they carry on, more damage to the body. So if they're intelligent, they will allow themselves to go through that self-healing phase, and they will come out the other side back to health. Another example could be a stressful relationship. So you get into a stressful relationship. It could be a year, a month, a week, 10 years, however long. and the body is in this stress phase for that amount of time. And then finally they get to a point where they go, you know what, this just isn't working, it's just not worth it, I'm not happy, or I'm fed up of being treated like that, I'm just not going to put up with it anymore. And we just go, that's it, I've had enough. And we end the relationship. That puts the body back into the regeneration response. Maybe we feel tired, maybe we get sick, could be many different ways that the regeneration response shows up. But we may also go through emotional healing at that point, because during the stress phase we may have been holding everything inside, not really acknowledging how we're feeling. But once we go through the healing phase, we're going to be doing lots of emotional healing, and then we come out the other side back to health. So, you know, we could just say, yeah, there's an emotional upset, and then we go through an emotional healing and we come out the other side. But we must complete this yin-yang cycle. So, as I said at the start, because I'm going to show you what I did to heal my eye, but it's really, really important that I say this is what I did. I'm not advising you to do this. If you need to seek medical attention for, you know, severe physical symptoms, then please do. And if by any chance you haven't yet watched my 5 Levels of Healthcare, Consciousness and You free online program, then you may want to take a look at that, because what I'm about to share really is part of an understanding that I've come to, that according to our worldview, our paradigm, our understanding of health, our understanding of the body, and our level of consciousness, we will actually choose different types of healthcare. We will gravitate towards a different type of healthcare. And I'm not talking about whether you go to, you know, a Reiki practitioner or an energy healing practitioner. I'm talking about, you know, do you just only go to a doctor because you think that you only look at the physical part of the problem, or do you go to somebody who understands the metaphysical level of the problem as well? Meta just means beyond. So you might want to check that out, the 5 Levels of Consciousness, Healthcare and You, and it describes the different levels of consciousness of a human being, and how as we evolve our consciousness and we raise our consciousness and we expand our consciousness, we will have more types of healthcare available to us. We will come across more types of healthcare. Because one of the things that I discovered for myself was 30 years ago, all I knew was to go to a doctor. That was the only thing I knew about healthcare. I had never heard of a natural healing practitioner. I'd never heard of an osteopath or an acupuncturist. I hadn't heard of nothing except for a doctor. And that was partly because of that the system was much more geared to that 30 years ago, but it was also because that was my education, that was my conditioning, that was my belief, my paradigm, and also my level of consciousness did not know anything more than that. Since then, much has changed, and I now know many, many different types of healthcare, and I've personally tried over 200 different types of therapies. So this was my eye, a picture of my eye starting to swell up 2 hours after an emotional upset. And then this was my eye 7 hours after that upset. And then this was my eye 20 hours, so it was much better, a little bit of red still. And then this was 50 hours, about 2-3 days afterwards, back to normal. So let's look at the eye and what this could mean. So the eye physically, we know, is to see, right? It's about being able to see. But every organ, tissue, cell in the body has a metaphysical function. Meta means beyond, so it has a beyond physical function, and it has a biological function. So not just a biological function, but it has a biological function. And the eye is, yes, it's to see, but it's also about being seen, being recognized. And this is this is very, how can I say, I'm only putting a few bits in here of the different meanings, the metaphysical meanings to each tissue within the eye, because literally every organ, tissue and cell in the body has a metaphysical meaning and its own unique metaphysical meaning. It's very, very fascinating. I'm going to share more at the end of this webinar how you can find out more about this. So the cornea is about visual separation. So feeling that we are separated visually from, usually from a person, because usually our feelings of separation are to do with a person, could be a thing, but mainly it's to do with people. The choroid is a visual chunk indigestion, which means that we're unable to digest something emotionally, sort of on a visual level. And the vitreous body is a fear of threat from behind. In other words, if we're frightened that somebody's going to get us or stab us in the back or attack us, and I'm talking more maybe emotionally and psychologically rather than actually physically here, although it could be physical if you're in an abusive relationship. So this is just so fascinating, right? Every cell, tissue and organ in the body has a metaphysical function. It is not just doing a physical job. It is doing a metaphysical, biological job. And again, this is not yet well known in the medical system, but it is starting to change very slowly. And hopefully, you know, my dream is that every doctor is trained in this and knows this. So coming back to this healing cycle, looking at an example again of a stress and an emotional upset, and then the emotional healing that one has to go through, and the symptoms that, well, that I had to go through in this particular example to come out the other side. So I had a stressful event happen. Well, there were sort of two that ran one straight after the other. And one was I received an email from somebody where I had opened my heart and shared something, and they basically had not heard me. Or in this, obviously I felt that I hadn't been seen, right? And interestingly enough, in the stress phase, I had a very, very itchy eye. It was actually very itchy. And at the same time, I was also literally about 5 minutes after I received that email, I was in a coaching session with the business coach, which also was creating a lot of stress inside of me. And so I went through this stress phase of this coaching session after just having received this email where I really didn't feel heard or seen. And for about 40 minutes, my eye just was really, really itchy. And I was rubbing it a bit. And then by the end of the session, I started to feel a lot calmer. I felt a lot more at ease, and I felt like this person, the coach that I was speaking to, really heard me. She really heard me, and she really saw me. And I'd shared, you know, what had happened with the email and in general what was going on. And that created what we call the regeneration trigger, the conflict resolution, the regeneration trigger. And as a result of that, my body then started automatically to go into the regeneration cycle or the regeneration phase. And that was when symptoms started to show up. So if we go back to the 2 hours after that, after the regeneration cycle kicked in, my eyes started to swell up. And I didn't even know it wasn't painful, and I hadn't even looked in the mirror. So initially I hadn't really noticed it, and then I started to notice, you know, it feels a bit weird. And then I looked in the mirror and I thought, whoa, gosh, that looks different. And then 7 hours later, it was really, really swollen up, and I was like, whoa, that's freaky. But I just had this sense that, okay, this could be a regeneration response. Now, I do want to add that I did actually take myself to the optometrist because I wanted to find out what exactly is this part of the eye. I just wanted to know physiologically exactly what is the part of the eye. And I can't actually remember what they said now as I'm speaking, but what was interesting was they did want to test for, they wanted to test for infection. And of course they wanted to send me, you know, to the doctor. And of course they have to say that. But I thought, no, I'm just going to wait and see if this is a healing response and if my body's just doing its thing and it's going to come out the other side. If I feel it's not, then I will take myself to the doctor. I will go to an eye clinic. But I just wanted to see how is it going. And as I said, the next day when I woke up, it was looking much better. And then 2 days, 3 days later, this is, you know, it's looking fine. And it's now like 4 days, I think, from when it happened as I speak right now. So, so it was in a reparation phase. And as I said, this stress and emotional conflict that set it off was I didn't feel seen. And it was a big issue that I'd been liaising with this person. It was a big issue, and then the conflict resolution was that I did feel seen by this coach, and that put me back into. And I also felt a lot calmer after talking to her, and that put me back into the regeneration response. But I also want to point out something here: is that whatever we have turning up in our life today, it is usually, I'd say 99% of the time, a repeat of the past. There's always something deeper, and I call this the surface and the deep. And so when I asked myself and I delved into it deeper, I realized that it was because I'd never felt seen and heard as a child. So it was just another piece of the puzzle coming up to be healed. And actually, because right now I'm going through a phase of really healing some old birth trauma, it was because I never made a connection visually with my mother when I was born because of the trauma that happened at the birth time. So our birth can create an incredible amount of trauma if we don't have a very calm birth. And so there are just so many facets to understanding, you know, all the pieces of the puzzle that go to why we get symptoms, whether they're severe or not severe. It's a huge topic. So I hope that has been interesting. What I wanted to share was the fact that you know, often there's a bigger picture and a bigger reason for symptoms. Our body often produces symptoms in the healing phase, and if we know this, and we know how to deal with it, and we know how to clear the emotional, psychological traumas that have triggered everything in the first place, then our body can complete the healing by itself, because it is incredibly, infinitely intelligent. One of my favorite phrases from one of my teachers is, our body is far too intelligent to make mistakes. And I would have to say, yes, I agree with that. So just to share, to finish with, this month we have a fantastic event which I'm part of. There's a film, I'm going to put the link underneath this. There is a film that you can watch around a lot of the theory that I've been sharing in this webinar. I'm on the film very briefly, so you'll have to watch out for me there. It's only about 10 seconds. And then from the 1st to the 7th of June, there is the Lifestyle Medicine Summit. All you have to do is follow the link from the film and you'll be automatically subscribed to this multi-speaker summit with real leading edge doctors. So doctors who are really embracing this information. Leading edge health practitioners, and there I am, very proud to be amongst this group of health practitioners and doctors. So we'll be talking and sharing all this juicy information and understanding you know, how the body can heal itself, and that we don't need to be reaching for the medication or even the supplements. Our body can heal from the inside out if we understand what is causing the problem in a much bigger way. So any more information, you can go to my website, kimknighthealth.com. Thank you for joining me.